There's no denying that Jon Moxley is the undisputed ace of all elite wrestling. And by that I mean, when the chips are down and AEW needs a guy to carry the flag, they need a guy to carry the brand, they need someone to be the flagship and the front man and right the ship. There is no better person for that job, and there is no one who has done it better than Jon Moxley. If you go back throughout his entire career in AEW, that has essentially been Jon Moxley's role as the guy whenever there's a problem, whenever there's an instant where things don't go according to plan. Moxley is the fallback plan, and he never misses. Go back to the pandemic in 2020. Things were uncertain. We didn't even know if All Elite Wrestling was going to survive the pandemic. We didn't know if the show was going to be watchable. We didn't know if fans would ever return and if the excitement of those early months of AEW Dynamite would ever come back. Yet, as the reigning and defending All Elite Wrestling World Champion, Jon Moxley was there week in, week out, making sure that the show went on without a hitch and ensuring that as the star and as the flagship of the company, he did everything in his power to keep the fans coming back. Throughout the uncertainty, during a time where WWE was struggling mightily to adapt to the new surroundings, AEW and Jon Moxley were thriving. They were telling great stories. Remember, this is when Mox had that summer feud with MJF. This is when Jon Moxley essentially helped make Eddie Kingston into a star going into Full Gear 2020. This was during a time where Jon Moxley reminded everyone exactly why people thought that he should have been the world champion back in WWE. And if you fast forward a couple of years to 2022, in the fallout of Brawlout, when the AEW World Championship had to be vacated for both injury and, quite frankly, suspension, Moxley was the guy that Tony Khan and AEW trusted to right the ship once again. And throughout that tournament, people felt that potentially it was going to be Bryan, but looking back in hindsight, we all should have seen it coming, because whenever AEW has these problems, Moxley is their fallback guy, and it's for good reason. This is someone who bleeds AEW literally almost every other match. This is someone who embodies a lot of what AEW and the spirit of especially early AEW was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a place where you could have the freedom to be yourself. It was supposed to be a place where you could emancipate yourself from what professional wrestling used to be, whereas promoters, territories, and companies would essentially own you, own your name, own your likeness. AEW was supposed to be a place where you could make money, tell amazing stories on a big stage, and do it while being yourself. And when Jon Moxley appeared at Double or Nothing in 2019 and he walked through the crowd and made his debut in AEW, it was evident since that moment that that is precisely who he was going to be, and that is precisely what he was going to represent for this brand. And that's why Moxley, regardless of what title he's going for or wherever he is on the card, is always presented as a star in AEW, and it's kind of hard for him not to be. No matter what Jon Moxley does in AEW, it's going to be important, because aside from the Elite, aside from Omega, aside from the Bucks, aside from Hangman Page, you could argue that Moxley is indeed the heart, soul, and spirit of AEW, that he's the guy who most closely represents what the fans want the brand to be. And he's a guy who, when the brand was at its hottest, was leading it through that period during the pandemic. And Jon Moxley, whenever the story is written on him, There's going to be many things you can say about him. He is one of the most infectious personalities, even when he's not cutting a promo, that there is. His in-ring style may not be for everyone, but it is a style that he has made unique, which is somehow a combination of Bruiser Brody and Terry Funk. It has the ability to be comical whenever he needs it to be, but also so serious and gritty and brooding that you cannot turn away, even though it's probably one of the most bloody scenes you've ever seen. And you combine that with the fact that he's one of their best promos. On top of being all those things, Mox is also someone that fans genuinely want to root for. He is such an affectionate and likable personality in the weirdest way. You wouldn't know it by looking at him, but Moxley is known to be a sensitive guy. If you listen to his interviews, especially those with his wife, Renee Paquette, he's someone who's deeper than a lot of people give him credit for. And just go back and look at when he returned from rehab, which was something that he talked about at length on his podcast with Renee Paquette. This was a moment that had not only Moxley fans and AEW fans cheering for him, but also professional wrestling fans, many of whom had not tuned into AEW, at least for a while. And that just goes to show how beloved Moxley is by the broader wrestling fan base. And that's why, like, when the Shield's music played at WrestleMania this past year, there were many fans who thought, oh my god, Dean Ambrose is going to come out. And it's not just because it would have been a cool moment, but it's because fans miss Dean Ambrose. They miss Jon Moxley. They miss the guy behind the character. And if there was ever a guy you'd want to hitch your wagon to when you're in trouble, it's probably the guy who's beloved by most of the entire wrestling fan base, which is a very difficult thing to do, I might add. And if I'm Tony Khan, no matter what, and the free agent landscape in wrestling is always going to be uncertain, especially now that WWE is hotter than it's ever been. But if I'm Tony Khan and I'm making a list of people that I cannot lose, a list of people that no matter what, you offer them the Brinks truck, you back it up like there's no tomorrow, Jon Moxley is at the top of that list. Because no matter what you go through, this is a guy who is proven that he is up to the challenge, that he is up to repping the brand, that he is up to guiding professional wrestling through tough times. Just like he did during the pandemic, just like he did in the fallout of Brawlout, and just like he has been doing and waiting in the wings whenever that next moment comes. The ace of all elite wrestling.